Very good evening to one and all present here. We, the students of the Vinod Gupta School of Management, IIT Kharagpur, are extremely privileged to have amongst us Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan, CEO of the Mindworks, corporate advisor, and a distinguished author. Physics graduate from St. Xavier's College, Calcutta University, and a beloved alumnus of IIT Kharagpur, Mr. Gopalakrishnan has attended the Advanced Management Program at Harvard Business School. A professional manager since the late 60s, he has served in several reputed positions, such as the chairman of Unilever Arabia, MD of Group Bond Lipton India, and as the executive director of Tata Sons and several Tata companies. He serves as an independent director and non-executive chairman of Castrol India, and also as an independent director of Himas Holdings PLC, Sri Lanka. He also mentors startups and has authored several best-selling books, such as The Case of the Bonsai Manager, Lessons from Nature on Growing, and When the Penny Drops, Learning What's Not Taught. It is an honor to host you today, sir. And without any further delay, I would like to request our esteemed guest to kindly address the gallery.
IIT, I've been trained to follow instructions. Thank you very much. What's your name? Nirmal. Nirmal means pure, no? I hope you are. When he tries to bluff you, hold him to his name. Well, thank you very much. A great pleasure to be here. I am told that I could speak for maybe half an hour, 40 minutes, and then have an interaction. I am very happy to have it as an interaction without talking to you. But that will be very mysterious, because I don't want to come here as though I can talk about anything under the sun. So I'll say a few words on some things that bother me. But you are welcome to ask any other question. The worst that will happen is I'll say I don't know the answer. That's entirely possible. And I'm very interested in your opinion, because it's a long time since I was your age. And the way I'm thinking maybe is open to an alternate point of view. And the thing that I'm very curious about, and have been curious about for a long time, is, can ethics be taught? Is it relevant, and can it be taught? You can argue, as you can imagine, many ways, that it all happens in the family, the mother, the father, go back. How is it taught? And I want to narrate 3 or 4 little instances from my own career, not from my family. I want to say that it can be institutional. That's the point I'm trying to make. Family and all, yes, it does matter, but there's no point my telling you how your parents should have raised you. That's a bit of a pointless exercise. So when I finished my studies here in computer, in those days, studying computers was considered to be a mysterious subject. And then I joined my company, Hindustan. And they said, before you write computer code and do all that stuff, you have to learn the dhanda of the business, the operation. So I was sent off to do some work as a salesman and supervisor. Of course, I hated it. I didn't like it. Somehow I thought I'll be in an air-conditioned room, pressing buttons and seeing discs and tapes operating. Anyway, it had to be done, so I did it. And I was assigned to work in Nashik with a salesman called R.S. Kelkar. So I was 20, 21, whatever. And Kelkar, of course, was 50 or whatever. And he was teaching me what a good salesman would do, this, that. And then there would be a Saturday or Sunday or whatever. And since we were in Nashik, I was stuck in the hotel, the very third-rate hotel. 4 of us had to share a room because my daily allowance was 6 rupees per day. So I couldn't afford to stay in any nice hotel. So to relieve me from all this, he would take me to see some tourist sites. Anybody here from Nashik? No. Could I? Where in Nashik?
So here, Mumbai, we are Mumbai.
Sorry?
In the center of the city,
In the
city place.
in the city. So, as you know, there is a Sita Kund there, there's a Ram Kund. You been there? So you can confirm that I'm telling a true story. You know the Aadhaar card, you know? Certified by Nashik, please sit down. So he took me to the Sita Kund, Ram Kund and so on. And you know, you're 21, I don't know if you wanted to spend your Sunday visiting all the temples. And Nashik has plenty of temples like Bhubaneswar. Anyway, he then asked me a question. And the question was, why is it that in every time you enter a temple, the entrance is so low? You have to bend and go. Now, I bend and go, but I never applied my mind to why. And then he told me, Namrata Dharma. Be humble. That is the reason why when you at least go to the house of God, keep your head down. Baki time to keep your head up. I thought about it and I said, okay, it's a small episode, nothing to write home about. But when I started thinking about ethics, it came back to me. It's a little story, nothing earth-shattering, but I remembered it. And I then met the chairman of the Murugappa group. They are reasonably well known. And those of you who are from Madras, Tamil Nadu, anybody here? You heard of Murugappa group, huh? So this is also Aadhaar card stamp. Now Subbu is 80 and he's quite a seasoned, wise guy. So he asked me a question which perhaps is known to some people. He said, why does a mother always carry the baby on the left shoulder and not the right shoulder? Now I have had 3 children and 5 grandchildren. But I wasn't observing. I was observing the child rather than on which shoulder the child is sitting. But then it turned out that he was right. Nobody carries the child here. You always carry the child here. You know why? You're still a child, I think. Yeah. So then he told me that lots of studies have been done, that the mother's heart is communicating with the child and is closer to the heart. My first reaction as a good IIT engineer was to Google and find out. And I said, hey, why does everything in the world have to be Googled? Kuch to cheez hai, just accept it as it is. It's a nice little story. Don't sort of accept everything through Google. But when I reflect on these 2 little stories that I mentioned to you, a third question came to my mind. Throughout my 50 years of my working career, did more things get done by relationship or through knowledge? And I reflected on my own experiences. This is not a theoretical question or a trick question. So if I put on the x-axis relationships, you people must be used to it when everything has to become a 2x2 matrix, right? If I put relationship on the x-axis and put low and high, and on the y-axis, I put knowledge, low and high. If you're low on knowledge and relationship, then I suppose you're a problem. If you're high on both, it's fantastic. But most of us are not in these 2. We're somewhere in between. Do you think more relationship and less knowledge works better? Or more knowledge and less relationship works better? Less knowledge and? But what do they teach you in VGSoM? More and more knowledge. They pump your brain with knowledge. And I'm not saying they're doing the wrong thing. I'm just pointing out to you some reality. Because they're not terribly sure how to teach relationship, barring one HR course with somebody who's run. I reflected on these stories and I said that's been my experience. And The Punjabis have an expression for it, hole hole pyar naal, which for those who don't speak Punjabi means aista aista pyar ke saath karo. And I was then reminded of a story when I was doing all the salesman supervisor. After 7-8 years, I had become the regional manager. I went to Ludhiana to work with a salesman who was twice my age. And you know, I have this bad habit, I carry this diary. Like an industrial engineer, I write everything over here. I also used to carry a slide rule. You people don't know what's a slide rule, do you? It used to be a little device, which is like a ruler. We didn't have calculators. And you could slide it and work out ratios and square roots and so on. Why I carried it to sell dalda, I don't know. There's a mental aberration we all go through. So when I used to go to the field, I used to say, Acha, you sold 1,556, last year you sold 1,442. Bro, 11% more. He kar rahe ho tusi? One number kaise pata hai? And he would take out and divide and multiply to find out. He says, yes, you're right, 11% hai. Yede bich tu pata kaise laga tu? So I used to do all this, and I went to the market with Sue, who was twice my age, with all this stuff in my pocket. And at lunchtime, Sue ji asked me, "Kyun ji, aap mere afsar hain, aapko kuch kehna hai to kaho." So I said, "Sue ji, I have found your allocation of time. That you are spending 28% of the time in greetings, 7% of the time in product presentation, 3% of the time in प्रोडक्ट डिलीवरी, ऐसा ऐसा करके कुछ हिसाब बताया उसको। इधर तो करना की है, ऐसे don't spend all your time greeting them, because you're really a salesman, you're supposed to sell. इधर एक काम करो जी, तुसी करके दिखाओ ना। ऐसे बड़ी है। Imagine in Jalandhar, in Punjabi. Now this chap's 28% of the time would say, Lala ji ki haal chal hai, poti da ki haal hai. You have to start from there. How is your daughter-in-law? How is your mother-in-law? I didn't even know the guy is married. How do you ask about mother-in-law? So my calls finish very fast in the afternoon. Because I say, Lala ji, namaskar, mera naam ye hai, main yahan se aaya hoon. Ye haan bolo. Ye kitna peti life boy likhna hai, kitna dalda likhne ka hai. The conversation was over in about 2.5 minutes. And so I finished everything by 4 o'clock. Then he said, "Kaisa laga?" I said, "Theek nahi laga, but I don't know these guys." He said, "Janab, मेरी बात सुनो, जिंदगी में आगे बढ़ना है तो रिश्ता रखो, बाकी सब हो जाएगा, नंबर निकालना। देखो आप मेरी बात सुन रहे हो, आपने मेहनत करके दिखाया मुझे, आप इस कंपनी में बहुत आगे बढ़ोगे, मेरा आशीर्वाद है। अगर आप नहीं करते ना और अपना रौब दिखाते तो मैं सोचता कि ये लड़का कहाँ तक पहुंचेगा। अच्छा किया, आप बेफिक्र चलो, तुम चलो, मैं संभाल लेता हूँ। आप हालांकि मेरे बॉस हैं, बट आई विल डू इट। While going back in that train in the night, I reflected on it. He was giving me a message again of humility. Because I was his boss, I could have said, and raised my voice. I didn't put all these stories together. There are other stories, I will not go into all of them. And I said, what is it telling me? And it's telling me that much of what at my age I remember of my education is about slight emotional Bluetooth experiences. Not the formal experiences that were tied and wired. So what do I mean by a formal experience which is tied and wired? Which is wired. For an ET lab, I did lots of courses under Professor Balram Murthy. I went to the electronics communication lab and did, wired boards and so on and so forth. I even wrote a paper on how to build a 2-bit shift register. I don't remember any of that. Zero. My professors are all dead and gone. So, but even when they were alive, I used to tell Professor Sanya, बिल्कुल याद नहीं है. But what Professor Sanyal told me on a particular day, or Professor Rakshit told me on a particular day in the Netaji auditorium, I don't know. And I said, why is that so? He is a teacher. He has taught me physics, mathematics, history, whatever. I don't remember anything. But something casual interaction in the Netaji auditorium on a particular Sunday. You still have movies on Sunday in the Netaji auditorium? You still have. For us, that was the only entertainment in those days, so we went there. And I remember those stories. And I said it comes back to the same reason why a mother carries a child on the left shoulder. It is to do with the Wi-Fi exchange of what I call the emotional Wi-Fi, rather than the rational wireline. So two kinds of messaging you get, therefore, when you are growing up and studying. One is the rational wireline, and I can guarantee you, if you not already forgotten, you definitely forget everything that is taught to you, and what your school teacher has taught you probably forgotten already. So then I said, how does a child grow up? So I went and talked to my daughters, my daughter-in-law, practical experience you have to ask. Then of course I did what all men do, they Google when they don't know what to do with life. And I found that, according to the child psychologist, up to the age of 3, a child has zero memory. Absolutely zero. From 3 to 8, it has a memory for emotion but not for facts. Now my grandchildren are 8 minus. All this time I spent in teaching them chess and taking them to the park and walking them to the school and telling them some story is having zero effect. I feel like my professors who taught me. It's very sobering and some way frustrating. But every time you hug your grandchild, every time you comb his hair or her hair, every time you lay in bed and read them a story to put them to sleep, you don't remember the story, but they remember that their grandfather or grandmother did this. This is called the emotional memory as distinct from the brain memory. And I think my grandchildren will think of me when they grow up the way I think of my grandfather. I vaguely remember my grandparents, they would give me some badam halwa out of turn without my mother's knowledge. Small, completely irrelevant episode. But whether they walked me to school or gave me some pocket money, I can't remember. So I concluded that children are not taught love and value and ethics. Children learn. Adults behave and act, children learn. Adults behave and act not to teach, and children learn not from a teacher, because it's Wi-Fi. I said, how do you replicate this in the field of business and management? This is possible because a child up to the age of 8 has a very plastic brain. And therefore emotions make a lucky on it. Facts don't. I said, to a young professional manager, I'm using the word manager, you can call it engineer, you can call him researcher, whatever you want to call it. Is that person's brain plastic? And don't go by biological, but learn by pedagogical brain. Because there is a different parts of your brain. You people have a very plastic brain today. It is very malleable. And if at an early stage in your career, and I use the word plastic brain because you are now going through the age of 0 to 10, 0 to 8. You have 2 years here in the institute, then you start working somewhere. Some of you might have worked somewhere for 1 or 2 years. And then you go and work. You go and work in some company. So the first 10 years are very important years, when your brain is, in professional terms, young and plastic. And that's the time then they will be in a position. So then I came across 5 experiences that I have been through. No rocket science. Experience-based learning never sounds like rocket science. It will not sound like E is equal to MC squared. But it's worth a lot more than E is equal to MC squared, I can assure you. The first is I'm associated with the SP Jain Institute of Management and Research in Bombay. And the way they have solved it is, it's compulsory for every MBA student to do a program called Abhyudaya. Now, who knows what Abhyudaya means? Somebody must be a Sanskrit scholar here. Nobody? Okay. They got a program called Abhyudaya, which is about, I think Abhyudaya has something to do with reliance and reaching out people. What is it?
Self-awakening.
Self? Self?
Awakening.
Awakening. It is something in that zone. You awake your inner kundalini or whatever you want to call it. So what they've been doing for the last 15, 20 years is all these kids come in for the MBA program, and no hostel is perfect in the world. And so you have a hostel where the food is like that, the rooms are like that, they're facing the wrong way, the toilet is like that. And then they tend to crib about it, right? They tend to crib about it, but they have to compulsorily do this part of the MBA and Abhyudaya program, which means that throughout their period they have to counsel slum children. They don't call them slum children, they call them disadvantaged because slum sounds a bit pejorative.
They call it sitaras.
Sitara.
Yes, sitara.
You know this. Now, can you not include a sitara in VGSoM? Since you know about it, you can be the person to do it. Now, the young people hate it. Actually, they don't like it. Who the hell wants to do this? I've come to study MBA, I'm waiting for the next investment banking job. But when I meet the alums, whom also I meet, when they are 35, they say, the best thing that ever happened to me is I went through that 15 years ago. Because I was cribbing about my room being this big. There I found 8 people in a room which is half that size. And they were happy. Madam Sushmita, where are you? Are you here? She's an expert on happiness, or at least she's teaching in the center of happiness. How could a slum child or a disadvantaged child be happy? 8 of them living in a 4 feet by 6 feet. And here are grown-up people with a little bit of money in their pockets. Much more privileged. Be unhappy where one person is taking a room of that size. When you go to see these slum children, you get insight into what kind of a life they have. And how lucky you are to be born where you're born. Because none of us has a control on that. You can't choose your parents. You can't choose where you were raised. If it happened well for you, that's fine. But not everybody has it good. We fail to learn. And they realize, without anybody telling them, this is like holding the child on your left shoulder. They didn't say, hey, I'm so privileged and I never thought of it that way. So I find that I would like to recommend your dean is here, your director, your faculty are here, that some equivalent of an Abhyudaya you should consider, whether it's to do slum children or rural development or in your, is Ansar still running that place?
Yes, still running.
I mean, you can decide, and I already know about the Sitara.
Actually, my friends are in SP.
Okay. So you can easily get your friends to drop in here and have a chat and devise a scheme and give it to the faculty and say, why don't we consider this? Don't just copy it, but give an experience which they otherwise may not have. So that is one which I wanted to mention. The second one I wanted to mention was SP Jain wanted to, there's a professor of ethics. I think you also have a professor of ethics. Is that you? So he came to me one day and he said, yeah, I want to teach ethics. So we have tried ABCD. It works, but up to a point. So I said, listen, ethics is a practical thing about life. It is not, you get a Ramakrishna mission guy, then you get somebody from Buddhism and they will give you a lecture and go away. So he said, can you help me? So I said, what I would do is to take the class of 240 people break them up into groups, 12 groups of 20 each. That makes 240. Tell the 12 in one group. Some of you will be writers, some of you will be interviewers, some of you will be researchers. Okay, give them some specific tasks. And I will provide you one CEO for each person. So my job was to get them 20 CEOs. So to get 20 CEOs, of course I used my personal leverage and connection. I had to write to maybe 25 and then 20 would work on it. I got some really good CEOs. You know, these are not chota-mota CEOs. Suresh Narayan in Nestle, I got Shiv Kumar in, then in Pepsi, I got Cyrus Gazza, you know, Mukundan in Tata Chemical. We have serious people, serious CEOs. And Nihal Kaviratne, former chairman of Unilever Indonesia. So I got, and in over 2 years, I got them 40 CEOs. I didn't get all of them, they got some of them on their own. And the process was designed to interview that CEO. If he agreed, you would record it. You asked him about 3 questions. Tell us an ethical crisis that you faced in your career and how you dealt with it. Second, now that so many years are past, how do you reflect on it and what have you learned? Number 3, looking to the future environment, have you got any words of advice for young people? And they were all very practical. There was no artifice about it. Then you now had 20 bits of papers and knowledge from 20 teams. And then the auditorium, all 240 were there, the faculty were there, I also attended it. Each of those teams were given 8 minutes or 10 minutes or something to present. And now they've got 240 students multiplied by 2, so that's 480. So it happened over 2 years. 20 plus 20, 40 CEOs. Interviews, tapes, papers, and they're doing a research report on it. Because it's not rocket science. You just get plain good common sense about how a person dealt with it. People came out and said things like, I can spare only 45 minutes. They ended up spending 5 hours. They got so involved with the young people because as you get older, you realize that your runway is now less. And if you can share anything with young people, why not? One of them said, come to my house at 5 o'clock for a cup of tea. Ended up giving 20 people dinner. Because he got so involved in the discussion. One of them almost had tears in his eyes. He said, I have not been asked this question before, but now that you asked me, this is what happened to me. It almost became like a catharsis, you know. So it did good to the CEO, it did good to the young teams. And I would like to recommend that some equivalent of that can also be considered. Then when I was in Hindustan, even we used to have a rural development project. This is my 3rd example after Abhyudaya, the ethics project. It was a dairy in a place called Tata. It had more bandits than cows. So we were not getting enough milk and there were more thugs in that area who were holding up people on the highways and so on. And we had a chairman who said, here's the solution to the problem. But we are going to send all our trainees there. Every management trainee will go to the village and live for 8 weeks. Now, you know, if you think UP is deteriorated, you're wrong. It's always been like that. UP has been UP. And it took a lot of effort. And I was in the group at that time, in the management, to make this happen from 1970 or 71, I think, we started this exercise. Every year, all of them go. And of course, the first reaction is one of shock. To live in a village, no, nowadays they say no internet, nothing, but in those days there was no internet problem. They eat the same food. Sometimes their mother tries to send them some food which they share with the villagers. One of them happened to have the name Yadav, and the Sarpanch was also a Yadav, so he tried to rig up his daughter to him, poor chap. We have to rescue this poor fellow. Because he was getting really confused, flustered, with this Yadav girls who were walking past him. We had very interesting sort of experiences out of this. But can you imagine that almost 1,200 of our trainees have been through this? And every one of them who has then now become a Hindi Banga or a Harish Parmani or a Nitin Paranjpe will always say that, that had a profound effect on you. It doesn't mean you're producing saints. It just means you're producing grounded people. And that's the essence of what I want to say. When I came to Tata, I did the same thing. I said, and the last example I want to give you, because then I'm going to open it up so we can have a little conversation, is what I call the tone at the top. Just like the parent has a very unique role in imparting values to the child, and love, and emotion. A parent can do this which no other person can, frankly. Even a grandparent has a limitation. This tone at the top is very important. What the chairman of your company or your managing director or your vice president says to you doesn't matter so much. You automatically filter it out. What they are doing is what matters. And so, if you say, "Chala do yaar, kuch kaam kara do," you get one type of signal. If you say, "Bhai, dekho, yahan ye Lakshman rekha hai, iske upar nahi jane." And I want to give you two examples. One of which was very much in the public domain and one of which is not so much in the public domain. To tell you how tone at the top travels very fast. Both bad and good. Tone at the top, maybe negative tone. We set up meaning I'm talking of Tata now, a joint venture with a company called Honeywell. So it was a joint venture called Tata Honeywell. A certain manager was put in there, he set up the project, factory was ready. But he couldn't get a single order because somebody wanted a backhand. After trying, the factory inauguration had been done, but there was no production going on. He went to Ratan Tata and said, "Allow me at least the first order." And then second order onward, he says, "No." He says, "So the factory will shut down." He says, "Shut it down. Doesn't matter. But I will not allow you to pay. The question doesn't arise." This guy came back, he said, "Since I can't shift my boss, I better shift my approach." Did something without paying, he managed to get his first order, second order. Later on, I became chairman of the company. And it is a wonderful little story, which is absolutely true because I was by that time in the room sitting next to Ratan Tata and I know this detail. Likewise, Tata Finance happened in 2001. At midnight, I was in some dinner party. I got a call from an anonymous person saying, "Aap logon ka Tata Finance mein bahut lafda ho raha hai." And then I get an anonymous letter which said some lafda is going on. I was not the only person to get it. At least 20 other senior people in Tata got it. We were shocked. We were beyond belief. And when a little investigation showed that there is fire behind the smoke, and that the managing director had misled us. Tata blew the whistle on itself. It announced that we had a fraud, and we are getting to find out what happened. We haven't fully understood. Told the Reserve Bank, told whoever we had to tell. And in those days, I remember the newspapers used to say, "Pagal hai Tata, chupke se kaam kara lete. Duniya ko batane ki kya zarurat." And then there was a shareholders meeting. I was sitting next to Ratan Tata, and one elderly person came and almost weeping said, "I retired from so and so place. I got so much money. I put it into Tata company thinking it is safe. Frankly, I am depending on that for our old age. Now it's all gone. Is there anything you can do to help us?" You know the Punjab Mercantile Bank case going on? Are you following it? Right now. And Ratan Tata got up and he said, "I don't know how much money is involved, but I give you my word that not one of you is going to lose your money. That's the Tata guarantee. And he sat down and I said, hey, you have no idea how much money it is. It could be 80 crores, it could be 8,000 crores. He said, but how can you tell these people? I wish the government had done that for PMC Bank. I know it has many implications, but it has many implications for Tata also. It will happen in Tata Steel and Tata Motors tomorrow. Finally, the bill, and I was on board, in that board meeting he signed was 800 crores. Our legal liability was zero. Because it's a limited liability company, under the Companies Act our liability was limited to our equity. But we paid 800 crores to keep honor. And that message had a far more important effect on the tone at the top than all the lectures on ethics. So I think there are, if you use the metaphor of how a mother raises a child, it's one of the finest relationships humanity knows. And a mother does it instinctively. She doesn't attend courses on ethics or raising a child. Shalini will ask Malini, Malini will tell Nalini, they'll find out. What a mother does for a baby, line managers must do for their babies. And management school professors or visiting faculty must do for them. Because your brain is plastic. I would hope I have made a small case for action and consideration, because I really think the world of business is at crossroads. When I started my career back 50 years ago, you judged companies by the size of their assets. And so you would find headlines which would say, Gwalior round to double capacity to invest 5,000 crores from Hindustan Steel, Tata Steel, etc. Frankly, somewhere down the line by the 90s, it all moved to information. Assets were no more the great competitive advantage, it was information. People would say, hey, so-and-so digitizing, so-and-so got into software. But when we go to the future, mark my word, I won't be around, but mark my word, in 25 years' time, people will say that's an ethical company. I would like to work for that company. Otherwise, there will be no Ben and Jerry's. There will be no Body Shop. These companies have come up based on an ethical value. And they have achieved tremendous market cap, and that will become the norm rather than the exception. That's my forecast, and I hope you'll all be part of that journey. Thank you. If there are questions, comments, we can have a conversation, otherwise go home and sleep well.
As you talk about ethics, so I have a question related to that. So like, there's more.
So sir, as you talked about ethics, so I have a question related to that. Like, there's moral courage. Sometimes you don't yourself take an unethical part, but you don't question or dare to question anything which is unethical happening around you or at your workplace. So is it unethical, or what's your perspective in that, especially at workplace? Like, so I've read about something about professional moral courage. So
I don't know if you include my response in the as an answer to your question. But all the things that managers require in their professional life are not taught. And whatever they really don't need is taught. This is not a criticism of these schools, don't get me wrong. Because we come from a pedagogical background. So whatever can be taught, whatever is explicit knowledge, we can impart. Economics, politics, psychology, those are possible. There's a body of knowledge, there are people who studied it, they are damn good experts, they are very good exponents of the subject. These are all tricky subjects in the margins. And then how do you assess? You have to give marks, you have to have some discipline after all, you're a university. So one of the skills, there are many skills that are not taught which I think young people should. One of them is how to disagree without becoming disagreeable. Possible. And when you do that, you created a new skill set. We are trained to think that disagree means thump the table, walk out, fight. But that's not true. Can I give you an example in case it sounds nice philosophically? I was invited by Unilever to go as the chairman of Unilever Arabia, and they had already spent $20 million or $15 million researching and preparing a project which was codenamed Witch Hunt. And the essence of Witch Hunt was, we are a 0% share in detergent market. Procter & Gamble is 95% share. I mean, this is some, Bakasur sitting there. And we said, we'll go and punch him in the nose. And you please do it for us. And $15 million had been spent. And I walked around the markets and found that the solution that they had found is probably not going to work. Which is to make a very compact detergent. So instead of putting one mugful of detergent, you just put half a teaspoon. This idea came from Japan. And Japan has small people living in small houses, in small streets, small houses, small stores. So saving that space was useful. I walked around the streets in Riyadh, in Jeddah, in Dubai. There were huge people. The women were even bigger than the men. The cars were even bigger than the women. The houses were enormous. There's no shortage of space. So why would they want to get a little half a teaspoon? I said, this will not work. The way they used to shop on a Friday or Thursday, they'll come with an SUV, which looked like a truck to me, and they'll fill it up. And I have 5, 6 kids running around all over the place. It looked like the most wasteful thing I've ever seen in my life. I went and told my bosses in London, I had a choice to speak up then, or at the end of it, say, मैं तो पहले से जानता हूँ. I was very tempted to take that option. But I rang up London and I told them I want to come and I want to meet the 2 directors. And I think without being disagreeable, I put across the point. Because ये नहीं चलने वाला है. There was $15 million. I said, why? You want to put another $20 million or you want to? And then we found an alternate solution which I won't do. So it is possible. Anything else?
So can you share? Excuse me.
Who's talking? Sorry.
So can you please share some of your experiences from Harvard Business School?
I don't know. Who that share? Harvard. Sounds very exciting to you. More sophisticated form of VGSoM. Honestly, they're very nice professors, very nice endowments, very nice atmosphere. I found it useful. You should share your experience. So it's not about Harvard. I went when I was almost 45, 50. So it's a long time since I sat in a classroom. It's a long time since I sat and went through 250 pages of case studies every day. You know? But that is what was the routine. Got up very early, you had to study all of this. But it was a great experience because you learned by conversation. I think there are 3 ways in which a manager learns: through connection, through conversation, and through contemplation. He provided all the 3. And so I tell people, if you're spending your life in a campus like VGSoM, where you're not engaging in conversation, connection, and contemplation, then it's like having a hamburger every day for lunch and dinner. But if you can engage yourself in conversation, connection, and contemplation, then it's like having a glass of wine with a nice meal, the way the French do it. And that's what I enjoyed about it. Not just replicate it here, no problem. Contemplation, connection, conversation. Easy to learn.
Sir, in this day and age, sometimes the lines between what is ethical and what is legal can be blurred. So how do we distinguish one from the other, and what are your thoughts on that?
You know, everybody has an inner compass. It's as blurred as your head is blurred. If you've chosen to make it blurred, it will be blurred. But deep in your heart, who you are, right? If you think it's all right to rob the bank, and you say, deep in my heart, I feel it's the most ethical thing to do. And do it. You get caught, then don't say little verbal over here. Deep in your heart, every human being, and I'm not being spiritual or philosophical, they're all born good people. Somewhere down the line, we still are good people when you've grown up. But a little temptation comes at you, do something silly. It is that moment that matters. It's like a batsman. Here I'm a 98, I'm Sachin Tendulkar, I'm there for 98. Now if I sneak it into the slips, then I haven't got a century. The record book will not change. It's that moment that matters, not the one you hit when you were 46 and got to 50. Nobody remembers that. And so I always say there's a magical moment when a magical thing happens. And your magical compass tells you what to do. You listen to it or you don't listen to it. There's never any ambiguity. When you decide to ignore it, you go with the consequence. You think Lehman Brothers would have collapsed but for Nick Leeson? What did Nick Leeson do? He did a trade which gave him bad numbers. So he did another trade to try to make up that. And then it just went on, like a Las Vegas program. So Dilip Bensey did the same thing in Tata Finance. He did some off-book trade, didn't tell the directors, that went sour. Either भाई पता लग जाएगा सबको और एक करो, पता लग जाएगा, फिर पता लग गया, गड़बड़ हो गया. I had the experience myself. I was a director for exports. I lost $1 million. I didn't lose it in a transaction or a trade. I couldn't find it. Somebody had, misappropriated. And I was in two minds what I should do. But I went to my chairman and I said, I feel very silly. But I've done something very silly. I don't know what I've done. I've never had to admit this in my 20 years of my career. I just become a director of the company. I need help. We are so scared to look vulnerable. I made myself vulnerable. My chairman said, we're going to help. And it worked. It's for me first. I can only share my experience. You have to follow your inner compass. It will tell you which is true or not. Yeah.
In the interest of time, we'll take only one question.
Good evening, sir. Sir, nowadays we see that everybody is in a rat race. So we just are competing with each other, that mental stress is increasing a lot. So my question is, what steps institute can take, or what role institutions can play to rectify this problem at its earlier stages?
If you want to be a rat, nobody can stop you from taking part in the rat race. It is your choice to be a rat. Nothing to do with the institute. Institute did not advertise VGSoM wants churras with a retake. You have chosen to be in the rat race. Please be clear. It's your responsibility. Institute can do nothing. The day you decide I don't want to be a rat, then you don't be in the rat race. Now, what you want to be, you have to figure out. I'm not saying it as, but I'm just trying to be very clear. Every human being is making his own choice about what it is that he wants to do. Harsha Bhogle finished with IIM Ahmedabad. Wanted to be a merchant banker and have his 3-bedroom flat and pretty wife and nice car and all that usual stuff. But somewhere down the line, the guy says, I'm not enjoying this. I love cricket. But it's too late for him to be a cricketer, and there was no T20 anyway in those days, T50 or whatever. So he decided to become a cricket commentator and analyst. And since then, Harsha Bhogle rightly says, you guys are spending all your life trying to enjoy your job. Whereas I've spent the rest of my life doing what I enjoy and they pay me on top of it. That's what you should do. Thank you very much. You've been very kind audience. I don't know if it's time that, am I required to stop now or? You look very serious. Are you engaged today? Have you been given this charge that you bring this to a conclusion by 10 to 7? कोई टेंशन नहीं लेना, आराम से. Last question, चलो. Breaking the rules, if there is one. None? You?
Sir.
I have worked with a Japanese firm. What I have seen is that they have very high standards as a nation of ethics. So, how can we say that as Indians we are lacking in that? Means
If
compared to
Japanese have high standard of ethics, how can we say we are lacking in it? I didn't say that.
that's my observation. I'm asking that why is there such a difference?
First of all, whether Japanese have a high standard of ethics, I don't know whose opinion it is. You must ask that person to justify. The way they dealt with Korean women in the war, the way they dealt with Nanjing, I mean, it's highly arguable point. I don't want to run down, I'm not saying Japanese are bad people. But the lower they go down, the worse they do the stuff after that. I'm saying there's a certain cosmetic, right? And then there is a certain. I don't like to be judgmental among other societies or nations. Since you ask the question, I'm saying you'll have to first clear in your mind whether the Japanese are more ethical than others. I'm not aware that there is any such. They give that impression, I agree, because they keep going down so deep that you almost feel their head turns But that doesn't mean you're more ethical necessarily. So re-examine the question that you have and maybe we'll have a conversation. Yeah, you wanted a last question. And then we'll close after this one. I wonder why only the boys ask questions and none of the girls. This is not to push the girls, by the way.
Thank you so much for the session. First of all, it was really enlightening to hear so many anecdotes. My question was, so ethics is a highly subjective question. So in my short work experience of 2 years, what I have experienced is different people have different definitions of their own ethics. And a lot of time our conflicts are based on the ethics we think are appropriate in that situation. So for people like us who will now have a management degree, will be in a position where we'll probably be leading 20 other people. What would you suggest for, because as you rightly said, there are no books to teach one what right ethics are and wrong ethics are. And in situations in your day-to-day office, you may not have the time to go back and sit and ponder upon how you could have done better with what happened. You have to be on your feet sometimes. And when the conflicts arise because of difference in your ethics with the other guy, how would you suggest youngsters like us to work on that?
I don't know if I can give you any generic advice, but you started by saying ethics depends on how you look at it. That was the start. So does beauty. But it doesn't prevent you from looking for beautiful women, does it? You don't get confused when you see a beautiful woman, or to be not gender specific, a woman seeing a handsome man. It's in their eye. So, let's not confuse these things. There are superficial impressions. But our human brain always refers to, so even if you get enamored with a beautiful person or the other, right? Then other questions come to your mind. Is this a person I can be with, etc., etc., etc. The same thing happens with ethics. There is nobody who has to take a decision on the spot. Anybody who tells you have to do that is wrong. When Rajat Gupta had to take his decision, he took his decision. He is responsible for it. He can't run away from it. He is a good friend of mine. But that doesn't detract from the reality. He, within 4 seconds of completing a board meeting, he made a telephone call. And I have been on for the last 30 years I have served on at least 25 boards. Each board must have met 5-6 times in a year. I have finished 150, 200. Never had the need to ring up somebody within 4 seconds. Unfortunately, he made a mistake. And he has been punished for it. So he cannot blame somebody else for that. It's an ethical lapse. Look what happened to Thomas Middleoff. Thomas Middleoff was in Germany the equivalent of Mukesh Ambani in India. The most celebrated, most well-known, wealthy, and he was running Bertelsmann. Bertelsmann is the equivalent of being, Times of India and Star News all put together. Biggest media. He was very celebrated because he's the media, the Jala bhi hota hai. In fact, that's one of the books, Pravina, we've written in our book, where Pravina and Kunal have helped me in a book called Crash. And I've written the Thomas Middlemore case. But then his brain got damaged. And he did some aberrant things. And unlike our country, where it goes to Supreme Court, Division Court, full bench, half bench, unta rehta hai. They put him in jail. And he wasn't trying to escape from Germany, lookout notice, all that stuff. This is all very peculiarly Indian stuff. So, I think I know there are many ways to look at things and so on. And it's not a case that I make, we should not have clarity in our mind. I'm not denying that under certain circumstances some things can look ambiguous. But try to take a metaphor to clear your head. It is possible that you see two charming girls, since you're a young man, I'm referring to girls. Two charming girls, both of them look of your type. They may also be interested in you. But you have to make up your mind. You can't be a two-timer, right? That's the story on it. Thank you. Thank you. Is that mine? So please sit down, please sit down. I don't want the distinction of displacing the dean, I say.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an thank you so much, sir, for such an informative and enlightening session. Your anecdotes on humility, the importance of relationships, ethics, and emotional learning has given us plenty of food for thought and introspection. I'm certain that the glimpse of your wisdom we experience today will shine light on our own journeys as the future managers of this country. I would now like to invite our Honorable Dean, Professor Pravina Rajiv, to present our esteemed guest with a memento.
Who is the person who mentioned he's getting stressed out? Rat race? Jatin, come here. As a one generation old, it's my contribution to reduce your stress. Let him present the manifesto. Nothing comes free in life.
Yes.
So I will extract your my pound of flesh at some point in time.
Okay, good luck to all you guys. Okay. Thank you. Bravo.